1. And we are hopefully live. Just check a couple of our channels to see if things have updated. But I'm going to go ahead and start this off, and then just let me know if you don't see it streaming, and we'll figure something out. So, hello, everyone, Facebook and Instagram folks. I am Heather Renee May, and I am so excited that you've joined me for this Texas book talk. It's an informal talk, and I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine, Scott Sloan, aka Sloane McQuiston, who is an author of some very exciting books. The book that I read was Risk Manager, and we met actually, I think, at the Winsboro Book Festival, right?
We did. Okay. We did.
Yes. And so I'm really excited. I wanted to ask you some questions, have you share some of your books, and we're going to talk some writing tips, and we're going to talk and answer any questions that people have. And this, just for everyone's information, this is going to be a weekly thing. So it's just a quick 30-minute intro kind of preview to some really great Texas authors. And I'm just going to check. Yes, it looks like Instagram is live, and hopefully Facebook is too. And fantastic. So Scott, tell me about your books, and also, like, I don't know where you want to start, because you had a whole series before Risk Manager. And so I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about you.
Well, I know that you write in a series. And when I wrote my first book, The Drop Off, I hadn't planned on it being a series, but it kind of evolved into one. And by the time I got to the third book, I was tired of writing a series. I know a lot of authors love it. They just keep going with the series, and they love the characters and the story. But apparently I get bored easily. So that's what led me to the Risk Manager. And so I don't know that I'll be writing a series anymore. So tell me.
I think it's a little hard, because I feel like even as I'm writing the series, like, it's fun in some ways, because each book you can kind of develop different characters.
Yes.
But also, yeah, I'm like, okay, this is it. This is the third book. It's going to be great. And then people will write me, we're ready for the next one. And I'm like, oh, but I want to write something different. Okay, we'll go back. So yeah, I think it's, it's kind
of. So it can be tricky to do that. And so I don't think I'm going to be a series writer anymore. I think I'm going to try and do mostly one-offs. I may do one follow-up. I've got an outline for a follow-up to the Risk Manager.
Ooh.
But I've got 2 other books in the works. So I'm probably not going to finish that anytime soon. But I do have a bit of an outline for it, so that I don't forget completely where my mind was going after that book.
Okay, well, speaking of Risk Manager, this is Risk Manager, and I have
posted. Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. And I got my signed copy from Scott. But this is there's politics, there's scandal. It's like a John Grisham set in Texas kind of. It was from page 1. There's a lot going on, and so I'd love to. Maybe do you want to talk a little bit about Risk Manager?
Sure, I would love to, and thank you for comparing it to John Grisham. Actually, one of my reviews compares me to John Grisham, and another one compares me to James Patterson. So that's pretty good company. I was pretty thrilled with those reviews. The Risk Manager really came about because my career has been in insurance loss control and risk management. And nobody ever writes a book where the loss control guy becomes the hero. So I thought, well, you know what? If I don't write it, no one will. So I did. So it takes place, young man, pretty much right out of college, gets his, quote, dream job in Austin, Texas. I mean, Austin is an awesome place, right? Especially when you are young and single and attractive, none of which I am, but the character is. So that's the important part.
Mm-hmm.
It takes place there, and he ends up working for a guy who gets chosen to run for governor. And that's the Texas politics you're talking about. And so for those who are fans of Texas politics and the good old boy system, you're going to really love that part. The first chapter kind of explains to you why the sitting governor is going to choose not to run again. That first chapter is a love or hate chapter. You either go.
It is. You told me that when I got the book, And then I was like, absolutely. The first chapter, I was like, ooh, I'm not sure I can keep going. I don't know. How do I feel about this?
Yes, yes, it is. It's a little out there. So
But but the thing about it that I love is that I think that really good mysteries or thrillers is like you bring people in right on the first page. Right on the first page, something's happening and people are intrigued. And I think,
yes, that was the goal. So hopefully I don't run off more people than I attract with it.
no, for sure.
So, but then as the book goes on, the governor or the guy that's running for governor is his boss, and he needs a way to set himself apart in the political arena. He's got the business acumen, the family name, all that sort of stuff, but people don't know him from politics. So the company he's working for has one DOD, a Department of Defense contracts. So he manages to convince some Texas redneck secessionists to bomb his building. So now he can call it domestic terrorism. Well, he knows who did it. So he leads everybody along, finds the bad guys. He's the hero, right? But in the process, he throws the risk manager, young Rock Cartwright, under the bus for poor security. And the book really dwells or delves into what it's like to be tried in the court of public opinion and how brutal that can be and how long lasting that can be.
That's really interesting because that is what I am. Some of that is what I'm coloring into my third book, my third novel, which I find I'm really fascinated public opinion and rumors, how they can shape so much of a story. So,
well, that's a great segue. So tell me about that. How are you using it to form your character and the people that are either with him or against him or her?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So I don't want to give too much away, but like, okay, just to preface, I have a Texas wine trail series. And so it's kind of this Hallmark-like fictional story, fast read, but it's set in real places in Fredericksburg, Texas. And it talks about real Texas wine, real wineries, real vineyards, all of the things. So it's a guidebook and people, they read the story and then they want to go see where the characters met and go to the actual wineries. And so book 3 is a mystery on the wine trail. Someone is sabotaging things and we don't know why. But in book 2, I laid the groundwork of all the California folks coming in and building wineries and like moving into Texas. So you started to see the friction between California and Texas. Well, this book has been so much fun because the first 2 were like romance and this and that. The third book is like, I'm just destroying characters and destroying things. And like, I mean, it's so much fun to write. Like it's really been just absolutely validating. But I think, and it's my first mystery. And I was going to ask you about that too, because I think like for me, I found, because I was thinking through, okay, what are the ways that someone can sabotage, you know, grapes, wine, juice, things, equipment? What are, you know, what are some things that I can use as tools throughout the story without giving away what's going to happen? Because you won't know who did it. But like the thing, you know, trying to figure this out. And then I realized that one of the tools I'm using is actually leaning into the public opinion and what people say. So like, there's like, if someone's saying something's happening and then there's like a town, like a city council meeting where this is being surfaced and it's like, I'm kind of playing into that whole border kind of divisive stuff where people want to protect their own land and resources and they want the outsiders to stay out. But yet at the same time, there has to be a compromise at the end. So like, it's been really interesting. Like I didn't have to be quite as explicit about it, but I was able to, I'm like kind of working with it and like actually letting it happen. Like you can kind of hear the rumor mills going and you know how it is. It's like a fire in the desert and, you know, it's just going to catch fire quickly and go. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. It can kind of take on a life of its own. And I love the fact that you put real places in your book. I did the same thing in The Risk Manager, and it was so much fun to talk about places I had been, places that exist, places that used to exist that no longer exist, right? And put that realism into the book so that people who are reading it will go, I know where that is. I've been there. Or, oh, that sounds like fun. I want to go there.
And I think it's really great too, like, because the wine, I'm helping support the local wineries and the businesses in Fredericksburg and around Texas. So, you know, it's informative. People are going to know, like when I first wrote my first book, Cactus Christmas, and I was pitching it and selling, going to events and stuff and telling people about it. And they're like, Texas has wine. And I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm like, it's a huge business. So
huge.
So then I started realizing that this part of what I love about this is that I'm highlighting all these different wineries, the different varietals, the terroir, like all of the things from Lubbock to the Hill Country. And so it's educational as well as entertaining. And I think that's been really fun, and it's been fun to partner with the wineries in Fredericksburg as well. So
yeah, I'm sure.
And also, I mean, it's really just my excuse to do research. So
yes. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's kind of like a writer's browser history. You want to be careful about looking at it, and you don't want to take it at face value, because it may have something on there like, well, how do I dispose of a body, right? Or how do I sabotage wine?
I love that. An author's browser history, or AKA don't tell Alexa certain things, because like it would really alert the authorities. Because like for you, like I haven't killed anyone, but like my browser history is like, how do you tamper with barrels? How do you like?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
You haven't killed anyone. In my newest book, which is it hasn't been released yet. It's a catastrophic type event, the fall of civilization. So I only kill about 6 billion.
Oh,
so you got a ways to go.
I do. Oh my gosh. Okay, so tell me about your book that's upcoming, and when is it going to be released? Do you know?
I don't have a release date yet. I'm working on final edit, and as you know, final edit can be anywhere from a week to a year and a half. Right? It's difficult to know when to say I'm done. So let me ask you, how do you know when you are finished? When you're like, okay, that's enough of a story. I know I could carry on with these characters or this place, but that's it. I'm done with this book. How do you do that?
So done with the book to be published, or done with this, like the series of the characters?
Just either. But let's talk about just your third book here. How did you know when you were like, that's it? It's time to pull the story to a close.
Okay, well, that brings up a really good question, a writer's tip question of whether you pants it or plot it. Because I feel like, and for those of you who don't know, pantsing is when you just write like the wind, and then your editor gives you back all of your edits from your first draft, and then you realize that you needed a little more structure with your plot. Plotters, you actually do an outline, and you try to stick to it so that you kind of control the pace and you can think through all the things. And so I think that for me, so my first book was pantsed, and I didn't really, I didn't really know. It's kind of hard when you're working with an editor and you get back your first draft, and then you're just like, and it's a lot. Because my experience, my first book, no, and I love my editor, Megan McKeever. She's of New York Book Editors. I've used her for all my books. And so she is super kind, but she'll just be like I had this whole chapter written. It was gorgeous. She goes, this is gorgeously written. It doesn't serve the plot. Cut it. And I was like, okay, and so like stuff like that, where it's like an editor is so important to help with the pacing and the structure. I mean, multiple editors, but for her, line and structural for sure. And I think that I thought when I gave her my first draft that it was perfect. I thought it was brilliant.
Of course you did.
But I think it's kind of hard, and I think that there is something to be said. It is hard. I think book 2 was a little bit more difficult. I read it back to do the audiobook this year, and I kind of had mixed feelings about it. I thought I could have probably done a little bit better. I really rushed getting it out 6 months after the first book, and it was just it wasn't my best effort. I think I could have spent more time on the edits. And so I'm really excited for book 3, because I feel like I'm plotting it this time, and I know when it's going to end, but I am getting to really spend more time. I mean, how do you do it? What do you?
Well, I'm a bit of a plotter. I like to do an outline. My first book, I mean, it was a fairly detailed plot line. It had characters in it and that sort of thing. My second book was less than that. My third book was a little less. The Risk Manager was more broad strokes. I knew essentially what the characters were going to do, but I had learned as I wrote along. And for me, my favorite characters are not the ones that I put in the plot line. They typically are not the protagonist or the antagonist. They become what I call a throwaway character, right? In my first book, The Drop Off, one of my favorite characters in that is Zamir, the Uber driver, right? I needed a way to get a 99-year-old and a 5-year-old to the store, to the grocery store, something very simple, right? And it's like, well, he's not going to drive and the 5-year-old's not going to drive. So I need an Uber driver. And as I begin to flesh out who this driver was going to be, what he was going to be like, I just fell in love with it, and I kept growing the character. And so I have found some of my favorite characters that come in by complete happenstance, or they're necessary, but they were originally planned as just, hey, Joe is going to do X and we're not going to see Joe again.
Right? I love that so much.
Yeah.
And in fact, that is how in book 3, the character that's actually becoming the main character is a total kind of throwaway side character from book 2, really 1 and 2. So like it's really fun to bring, and then it's been really fun to like flesh out the character, flesh out the personality, be like, oh, what are they like? What do they talk like? What are they thinking? What's their process? How, and it's been super fun to do that. So
yeah, and another thing I do once I write a character is I try to put down something about that character, some kind of details about them, especially if I think I might bring them back in later in the book, because it's very easy as you're writing to get bogged down in the details of that particular chapter, that particular dialogue, that scene or scenario that's going on, and you write it and you're like, oh, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Where am I?
Yeah. And
I finished this, but where am I in the book?
And I think for readers too, I think that readers, if there's too many characters introduced too quickly, like you don't have a sense of who they are or how they're different. Like,
okay, so let me ask you, do you put a list of characters in your book?
Apologize for my neighbors, Harley, if you can hear that.
I can't hear it at all.
Okay. I don't, because I don't have that many characters. And then I think also what's been really fun about book 3, I haven't had to really introduce anything new, and I don't have to explain too much. So book 3 is a standalone.
Nice.
Yeah, it could be the first book someone picks up, but like everyone kind of already has a sense of who they are too. So like I think book 1 and 2 were harder because I was trying to establish the characters and all their things. And now book 3, I'm like, we kind of know it. I'm able to tell new readers a little, just enough, but they don't need all the details. And that's actually made me write quicker for book 3 in terms of character development. But I don't have a ton of, I kind of focus on a handful of characters that intertwine, and their stories intertwine.
Yes.
But that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. I've started doing that, and my wife was actually the one that got me to do it. She reads a lot. She probably reads 3 books a week. And so she would lament sometimes. It's like, Lee, I wish there was a list of characters because I can't remember who these people are.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, that is a really good idea. So I've started doing that. And I've discovered in my writing that I put in a lot of people who are in for maybe a chapter, And so I thought, it would be nice. You could go back through the book and go, okay, who is this guy or this lady, right? And you could go back and it gives you a brief synopsis of who it is. So I've started doing that. I've gotten some feedback on it. Some people really love it. Others are like, eh. So I don't know. If we've got any listeners on the line, chime in. What do you think? Do you like having a list of characters in the book or no?
I'm going to see. Oops. Okay, I'm trying to see if I can look at any comments. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Which is
I kind of just blindsided you with that comment, so I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. And I'm not sure that I'm able to actually see folks. In fact, I think what I'll do is do it on my phone. It might be easier to see if anyone has posted, because Well, technology is not easy.
No, no,
But
it is. It is not my friend most of the time.
I think while I look for comments, I would love to hear like maybe if you want to tell folks like, do you have a writing tip? I know that a lot of people um, who there's probably a lot of writers out there who are going to watch this and say, you know, they want to start writing, but they're not sure how. And do you have like you kind of came about it? You weren't an English major. You this was not your life path. I'd love to kind of hear like how did you get yourself jump started as a writer?
Okay, so I see a comment on here from John Langston. First of all, John, thank you for listening.
Hi, John.
And you said you have not encountered books with a list of characters. So if you want to write back in, John, would you like to see that in some of your books? Or are you like, yeah, I don't care? But going back to your question, no, writing has not been, that's not what I went to school for. I'm more of an engineer. I'm a safety professional by trade, safety professional and risk manager. So it's more of that scientific, not the fluffy writing part, right? Which is probably why I like doing an outline. It makes it a little more linear for me. I can kind of tell where I'm going with the story and that sort of thing. It is interesting to go back after I finished a book and look at the outline and see how far away I got from it.
Wow.
Most of the time, I stay within, I would say, the guardrails of it, but that's
Yes.
about it.
No,
I,
that's great.
I get those the main points in there, but other than that, no, I don't. But how I got started was I just had a story for my first book, which is the story of a 99-year-old step grandfather and his 5-year-old step grandson. And it kind of was a story of an old man who had a lot of life stories. And he had this one story in particular about some pirates when he was out sailing around through the islands that no one ever believed. And so he recognizes that this 5-year-old is probably his last chance to tell the story to anybody who might possibly believe it. And so I kicked around the idea for a decade or more, and then finally just sat down, scratched out an outline, and was like, okay, that's kind of the main points there. And then started writing it, and boy, the story just flowed.
Mm.
It just flowed out of me. And so that's how I got started.
I do find that when the story's meant to be written, it does write itself. Like sometimes when I'm in the zone with my books, like, and I'll read back what I've written, and I'm like, did I actually write this? I don't remember actually writing, but sounds good. Okay, that's good. But like, I kind of get into so I write like scenes, like movie scenes. So I describe
Yes.
these scenes, and so like I kind of get into it that way. And I think that if it's and I've heard this advice from other authors too, like if it's too hard, maybe it's not the right story to tell because like
Yeah.
it's not like writing is easy, but I think that like if you're struggling too hard with it, then maybe try to find a different angle or maybe try to come at it a different way because maybe that's not the story that needs to be told. Maybe it's something else.
Yes. Or at least not told at this time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
so, so, John, I saw your comment here, and you say if it was an epic with many characters in time, it might be helpful. Okay, so John's kind of neutral on the list of
Yeah.
characters unless it's a really long book. So, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, tell me, how did you get involved in this? Did you
Yeah.
were you always a writer as a kid and that sort of thing, or?
Well, I've always done like some journalism here and there, and I've always,
Yeah.
written journals and different things. But no, I've never had anything. I've never written a full novel. And it was COVID, and I was in an 18-foot travel trailer in Spicewood, Texas, with my dog, lockdown, and I couldn't watch any more Hallmark movies. And I was like drinking wine, and I was like, okay, I want a movie where she doesn't have to get saved, but she saves herself, but maybe she gets the good guy, and there's a lot of wine involved. And so
Fair
I
enough.
went, yeah, and I literally went to Texas Heritage Vineyard off of 290. I was sitting on the deck because it was one of the only places open outside that you could sit, and I was drinking wine. I was like, what if this character showed up? And all of a sudden, I kind of saw this character show up, and this storyline of like, this plot of like, what if I met a stranger and we paired for tastings for a week? And then what if, and so I kind of, all of a sudden my character started, started seeing it happen. So what I did was, I mean, I work a full-time job during the day, but
Me too.
I would wake up early and I would write, and I did it by words. My first book, I did 1,000 words a day, and that was it. And I would check, and right about when I would get kind of stuck, I'd check my word count and I would have hit 1,000. I go, that's it, you're done for the day. And I'd move on, and I would completely forget it until the next morning. So, but now I've changed that a little bit. And now I've been writing by scene, trying to,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But, what about you?
Okay. So I'll answer that question, but I want to ask you another one.
Okay.
When you're writing a scene or some dialogue, do you see those characters in your head?
I do. I don't see them super clearly. But I do. I have the sense of what they're like, their hair, their mannerisms, how big they are, how yeah.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I find that really, really helpful with dialogue, because I can picture the two characters talking back and forth, their facial expressions. And that helps me put some detail into dialogue, because I've heard some writers say, oh, dialogue's very challenging. It's he said this, then she said that, right? But when you can visualize them and you think about what would their facial expression be, as they're talking or as they're listening, right? Would they be upset or would they be happy or whatever? Then that helps you add a little bit of detail to that dialogue.
Oh, 100%. And my books are a lot of dialogue. And so I've gotten, I think hopefully by book 3, I'm getting better at this. But also I have to say, I love your characters, like Rock, and there's certain characters that you definitely get a flavor of them from your dialogue right away. And I think that was something Stephen King wrote in On Writing about, not using adverbs, like she said this brightly, she did this, but but actually having the dialogue and their expressions or whatever.
Yes. I think it was Stephen King who said the road to hell is paved with adverbs.
Yes. Yes. So I'm very conscious of this, because I have a lot of lines of dialogue with characters, but some of my characters are really fun. Like one character, she's super Southern, has this drawl, and she says these sayings, Southern sayings, which has been super fun. And then, the other, so you kind of get a sense of different, one of the characters spent a lot of time in France. So the way she kind of words her phrases, or sometimes she gets her nouns and her verbs backwards, because that's what they do in French. So
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So there's kind of, I try to give the flavor of it. But dialogue for sure. I think that unfortunately with my book, it is mostly dialogue driven. So it's definitely an art.
Mine's a combination. I can, a bunch of it is narrative to kind of set up the scene. Mm-hmm. And in my, the one I'm working on right now, Hopelessly Human, The Big Reset, it's a catastrophic book, right? It's the fall of society. And the basic premise is the government became upset because they grabbed so much power during COVID, and then people stopped listening to the government. They were like, hey, we need another good catastrophe to claw back some power. And in typical human fashion, when greed's involved, right, the target's here, so we shoot way over the top.
100%.
And so they create this virus that, while itself is very dangerous, but the book focuses more on the reaction to a potentially cataclysmic disease as opposed to the disease. The disease doesn't kill that many. People kill that many, right? And it talks about how people react to it and how they become very jealous of the few resources they have. And then you get the economic downturn, and then people lose, it's that domino effect that crushes civilization.
Are you leaving it crushed, or do you have hope at the end? Because this is something that, with my book has hope. Yeah,
I know. It took me forever to find the ending to this book, and I know we're getting close to time. But I love the comment you made. It was a little bit subtle, but and this is a great thing for writers. A lot of times when you come across a problem when you're writing, just continue writing. Most of the time you can write the answer or the solution. And you touched on that. And that was the way it was with me. I didn't know how to finish the book because in places it's pretty dark. And then but yes, there is hope at the end. So,
That's good.
and you just have to keep writing and going. And you go, no, that's not working. Scratch that. Let's do this. And then eventually you write yourself out of trouble.
Oh, absolutely. And like, it is all about the act of writing, and we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of Texas Writers Month. And but I think for writers anywhere, whether you're in Texas or beyond, like the idea that to write is to just sit and do. Like,
Yeah.
I think that, it's like yeah, it is an action. It's something active. It's something that, and then you hopefully get a really great editor that you can partner with, and then who can help weave it perfectly into a story that's just sings. But I kind of think of it as like writing a good song. Like, you want to have, the verse and the chorus and the hook and and so, yeah. And we can go just a few minutes over. I think also I'm apologizing to Instagram viewers. I didn't realize I had to click the go live view on my Instagram channel. So you missed half of this conversation, and I'm really apologize for that. I'll get it right next week. Tech is hard sometimes, but this is Scott Sloan McQuiston. And also we were talking a little bit earlier about his Risk Manager book. You can also find the whole recording on Facebook. But anyway, yeah, are you going to do Winsboro? Did Winsboro already happen this year? The book festival?
Think, it might be this weekend.
Oh,
so the answer to that is no.
No,
because I've got other things going.
Yeah.
But before we ended, I wanted to ask you a question. How do you think your writing has changed from book 1 to book 3? Do you think it's matured? What do you think you're better at? And what do what still challenges you?
That's a great question. Thank you. And also, I really hope I'm getting better.
You are, without a doubt, you are.
So the first book I felt like was such a gem of an idea, and just the way it came together, and the authors, and my cover artist, and all the things. And my first book is Cactus Christmas. The second book, Cactus Wedding, I pushed it out really quickly in 6 months after the first book, so it felt a little rushed. And so I think I took 2 years off, which most of my readers probably weren't happy with. But book 3 has felt so different. It's a mystery. I feel like I'm getting better at not having to say so many things to get exactly the point across and hit it home, whether it's within dialogue or with me describing. And so I feel like I'm getting a lot better at that. And also I'm plotting it, and I feel like the arc and the plot are a lot tighter, and a lot, like, I know exactly, it's really the threads of things, and making sure as a mystery that I'm not letting the readers know too soon what's going to happen. I want them to be surprised. So that part of the tension, keeping the tension throughout, building it, having the right, moments and that are kind of unexpected. That's been the hardest part, but I think it's challenged me, and I definitely think I'm enjoying it more. I don't know. Hopefully it'll be great. It's coming out in October, so hopefully.
Well, I'm sure it will be great. Yeah. And I know exactly what you're what you're saying with that. The more you write, the more comfortable you become with the process of writing.
Yeah.
And it becomes easier to be more concise with your dialogue and your narration, right? Because narration can just go on and on and on and on, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got 3 pages to tell them the guy rode his bike down the street, right? That's too much.
Yeah,
he rode his bike down the street. There we go. And so I think as you continue to write, you get better at that, and you get more comfortable, like you say, with your plot, and that ability to move it on, and you decide kind of what your genre is actually going to be. My first book was just kind of general fiction. It didn't really fall into much of a category, but I'm more of an action and adventure now. And the third book in that series, The Destroyer, it is way more action than the very first one. Just because of the way the plot went, but I'm more comfortable with that. I enjoy writing that. I enjoy writing characters who are both horrifically evil and just unbelievably nice, right? Those two extremes of the human condition, right? Showing unconditional love to people,
Yeah.
but at that same time, just being just rotten to the core. I mean, that's fun to write. It's just fun.
Yeah,
So,
it is.
but you have to balance it.
For sure. And I think that I haven't gotten to go that far into like darkness, into darkness, because my series is supposed to be like a Hallmark like series.
Yes.
It's have that, So, but I have been really pushing on these themes in book 3 of division and rumors and people wanting outsiders to stay out, and there's a scarcity of resources, and it kind of is erupting and coming to a boil, and people are acting out on these rumors and on these things, and what the twist is going to be, bringing it back together to realize that the community has to work together, and they have to figure out how to bridge that gap, and they have to ultimately compromise and work together. But it takes sometimes something really major to get that to happen. And so
Yes.
that's been kind of fun to play with on more of a Hallmark level. But I also have ideas for other books that are completely out of this genre, that are just a whole different straight fictional that I would love to write. So we'll just see. We'll see what happens in the future.
Well, the good news is you got a lot of time to write it.
Yes.
So just keep writing is the key. Just
Yes.
stay with it. I know what I was going to ask you. Do you find when you get into writing and you say you write by the scene, right? And you try and finish, you get an idea for a scene and you try and finish it.
Yes.
And I like doing that as well. Sometimes I don't finish it.
Yeah.
But I can discover that just hours have gone by. What I thought was maybe 30 minutes is now 3.5 hours. And you're like, oh my gosh.
I spend an infinite amount of time going and doing research to describe it. So I have a scene at city council. Well, I've never been at the city council meeting in Fredericksburg. So I'm going on there watching videos and looking through notes and I'm trying to find exactly the tidbits I need to make it sound believable of what would happen.
Yes.
And that was like 2 hours of research. And then finally, just for this one chapter scene, so yeah, I do think
the research can be fun too, especially when it's realistic places, right? Like you've got in your books, you've got real places. So going there, or even just looking them up on Google Maps, looking at the territory around them, and pictures of the different restaurants and the places, and you see a picture or a poster or something on the wall, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. I want to make sure and note that in there, right? So you may talk about a character. He sat behind the autographed picture of Willie Nelson that hung in the corner that had been there for 20 years. And those little things there, that's just a lot of fun to write. And I think it adds a lot of flavor to the book.
It is. And in the back of each of my books, I have like a guidebook of all the places. So people will read the book and then they can go visit the places, restaurants, wineries, whatever, where the characters went. But they'll reading like, oh, they were sitting in front of this piece of artwork. Well, when they go, they'll see that. So in order, or I've had readers for my first book come to like a winery and be like, I want the Texican at Los Pinos Winery, or I want what they were drinking, and it's been really fun. It's been really fun for everyone. And I'm glad that it was like a COVID kind of project that ended up ballooning into all of this. And certainly, like, I think as we're wrapping up and this is kicking off this series of Texas Book Talk, but hoping that this is going to be a weekly series. I've got Missy Jane coming up next week. She is an author of like paranormal, romance, urban fantasy. She's got books about vampires, and her covers are amazing. And I'm really excited to bring her out. So, I'm going to start bringing these authors that I know every, Wednesday, or authors I'm getting to know for the first time that are in Texas, and trying to get folks to, encourage folks to, you might want to buy your best-selling book, but then maybe you want to try to find a Texas author to read that is going to be something along the same lines or along the same genre and help support Texas writers and authors.
Well, I am incredibly honored that you chose me for your inaugural session here.
Well, I was afraid if I didn't, you would kill me in one of your books, or
my wife is always doing that. She's like, she'll be reading along in it and she'll go, "You're going to kill this guy, aren't you?" And I'll go, "I don't know. You got to finish the book to find out."
That's it. That's it. Oh my gosh, this is great. Well, this has been so much fun. I'm going to have you back on. We've got more stuff to talk about, but I think we'll probably wrap it up for people who watch Friends in Fiction. They're already started their
Yes.
and I think it's Mary Kay Andrews' launch for her book Summer at the Saints tonight. So
Oh,
that's
very cool.
good. So that's on YouTube and Facebook if anyone watches that. But hopefully, y'all please share with others. Come back next Wednesday, and
Yes.
Scott, I'll make sure to share a previous post. We've had all your links so people can find you and
Thank
get
you
your
so
books.
much.
Yeah, thanks for
It has
chatting.
been a blast. Thank you so much. I love doing this kind of thing and talking with other authors and
Me
seeing
too.
what their process is and the struggles that they have and the successes that they've had. So again, I'm very, very honored to be in the inaugural session here. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great evening.